The innovators everyone credits for major breakthroughs, they weren't necessarily smarter than everyone else, they just had a quicker feedback loop. They had an environment where they could build, fail, retry, and repeat, and they didn't have any external sources pressuring them to complete it or have a high understanding. Understanding is the end goal, and being competent in whatever skill you're learning or whatever resources you're learning is ultimately what you want. But now we have AI. We can compress the feedback loop so we can learn much quicker. And so that's essentially the core thesis, but just written down. So build, fail, and retry. If there's no one grading it, there's no deadlines to meet, you ultimately enjoy it more. And so there's usually 3 things that you're doing right now. And that's information overload, being in tutorial hell, and overall just being a consumer. And what this looks like is you have all of these tabs, you've completed X amount of courses, you've done X amount of tutorials, you've gone through all of these roadmaps, but yet you're familiar with the content, but you don't comprehend it. You're not competent in the whatever you're trying to learn. And so when we go through tutorial hell, we usually end up watching, pausing, copy and pasting everything from what you've watched inside of a document or inside of your terminal. And guess what? You haven't learned anything. You've just copied and pasted. You've just copy and pasted. You've just Control-C, Control-V your way through a project. And what's really happening in your brain is that you're not understanding it. Like, you're familiar with the concept, but you're not competent. You don't understand it really well. Once you shut everything off and you try to complete a project without a tutorial, you're going to shit the bed. You won't know what to do. And so now you either fall into one of 2 type of people. You're either a consumer or you're a builder. The consumer being someone who goes through tutorial hell pretty much every single day, and they just want the answer. They don't want to understand it. Like, they'll say, yes, I want to understand this, but when it actually comes to it, their frustration tolerance is at an all-time low because they've just been going through tutorials, Control-C, Control-V. And the builder, they want to see why it broke, and they want to understand how to fix it. And one path outsources the loop to documentation and tutorials. The other one compresses it because you're learning by doing. And so that brings us onto these 4 innovators. So we have Michael Faraday, Thomas Edison, Richard Feynman, and Steve Wozniak. So Michael was a bookbinder apprentice, and he didn't go to university at all, but he spent 7 years as a bookbinder's apprentice and read through every single science book that he was binding. And he went on to discover electromagnetic induction and effectively invent the electromagnetic motor and the dynamo. And essentially his feedback loop, especially between peers, it would have been days, if not weeks, worth of waiting to get information from another source. Outside of that, he would have just had to have build, fail, and retry. For Thomas Edison, he built his own chemistry lab in his basement when he was 10, and he was selling newspapers to fund his experiments and fund all of the tools and gadgets in his lab. But he self-taught himself by reading through the textbook to get a basic understanding. But notice what I just said there, basic understanding. And then from there, he just experimented. He just kept on building, failing, retrying, and repeating that process over and over and over again. And the loop speed would have been days or hours, so each rebuild would have been within the days or the hours, of course. And then Richard Feynman fixed radios for cash, and he taught himself how to do that alone. So he had a knack for engineering. So what he did is he fixed radios in his neighborhood during a depression, in which he pretty much taught himself how to do electrical engineering. He pretty much taught himself how to do electrical engineering. And he found this out just purely based on trial and error. So it would have been great, it worked, or the radio just wouldn't work at all. And now he shaped how we see light and matter. So he ultimately changed how quantum electrodynamics actually works. So in his case, just based on the projects, the radios, it would have been instant because it would have failed or it would have worked. And that's the exact same for Steve Wozniak. So he rebuilt computer chips essentially. So he rebuilt his own design. So for example, in here, he was working with a 200 chip design and he did it with only 100 chips. And he pretty much rebuilt everything based off his own understanding. And that's how he learned. Alongside that and having a degree. But back then, information was contained by universities and or networks. Now, in 2026, we have all the information at our fingertips. We can get the information like that with AI. And now we can have AI to essentially tutor us. So you pair an AI tutor plus a mentor, you're pretty much getting a 3x on your learning. And so how? And this is how you use AI to actually progress. You're not outsourcing anything to AI besides the parts that you don't understand, and you're just getting it to explain it back to you in a way that you understand. So even if you were to go to a mentor and say, look, I'm struggling with this problem, they may explain it in a way that you don't necessarily understand. Now with AI, you can say, I want an analogy for X, Y, and Z, and you can get the information back like that. But there's two buckets here. There's real growth and then there's outsourced growth. Real growth being you build, the AI explains it, you understand it, and then you just keep on compounding that growth because the feedback loop has been compressed so much that you just end up understanding everything in a short amount of time. And then the opposite of that is outsourced growth. So that's using AI and for essentially everything. So you put a prompt in, you get the finished output, you copy and paste everything, you're done. And then your skill slowly deteriorates because you're not really using your brain, you're just using a computer to think for you. And a very simple way of understanding if your skill's degrading is can you get rid of Claude, ChatGPT, anything, and can you explain it without using AI? And this is pretty much just a baseline for do you understand it or not? You should use AI as a tool, not as a crutch. So if you can explain it without AI, raise the ceiling because you've learned and understand. You've learned and you've understood the problem. So let's go and do something harder. If you can't explain it, you need to stop. You need to go back to square one because you've regressed. and you've essentially just outsourced your cognitive functions to a computer. And with that being said, this is a feedback loop. This is outsourcing your brain. But that's a whole entire feedback loop system that you need to actually learn shit quick and get the best return on your time. If you want to see more about how I use AI in my learning, drop a follow, fucking do whatever. Because AI is here to stay, and I'm on top of it all. If you want to get the best results from AI, stay tuned. See ya.